No freshwater tank is complete without live plants as far as I'm concerned. But if you don't know how to take care of the plants, your tank can turn into a hot mess pretty quick. Follow along in today's video. I'm going to cover the 3 things that every person should be doing for their live plants. And then at the end of the video, cover some extra things that you can do if you want to get the most out of your plants. What up, fish friends? My name is Michael. I own an aquarium cleaning company, and we specialize in freshwater planted tanks. Naturally, you live on planet Earth, you know plants need light to grow. So to start off with, lights. Lighting is the most important thing that you can give your plants. Sky's the limit when it comes to lights, but at the end of the day, I would say any light is better than no light. Naturally, we want to find something that replicates something similar to what the sun does so that the plants can get the right wavelength to grow. So there are many different types of lights out there. You can spend a fortune on a good high quality light for your fish tank. Fortunately, you don't need to. So let's cover what it is that you should look for in your light. So basically there's 2 different ways that lighting is described from an aquarium perspective. One is spectrum and the other is color. Color is going to be the easiest way to pick a light, and fortunately that's kind of how the market is going these days. You can look for something between 6,500 and 7,500 Kelvin. That spectrum is referred to as full spectrum, and so you can't see this with your bare eyes, but this kind of white looking light, it resembles the sun, and it's actually spitting out a bunch of different colors of light that blend together to look like it's a white light. And that's what the sun's doing. It's providing very many different wavelengths of light so that the plant can absorb all these different wavelengths. It's got different pigments in it. You've probably heard of chlorophyll, this pigment that's responsible for photosynthesis. That's the main driver for plant growth. So if we give this pigment chlorophyll the right wavelength of light, it's going to really drive fast growth of these plants. We already got the color covered, 6,500 to 7,500. But what people used to do back in the day is look at the wavelength of lights. So you want to see anywhere between like 350 to 750 nanometers covered in the wavelength of light, right? Those are the different colors that I was talking about that we can't really see, but we know they're there. And you want to see spikes between like 4 and 500, and then between 6 and 700. So this is going to be kind of in the blue and in the red wavelengths of light. That's going to drive really good growth in your plants. That's also what we're seeing in WRGB lights. The red and green and blue spikes that we're seeing on this graph, those are reflected in the white, red, green, and blue diodes. So picking the right light for your tank, you can hop online and do some research. You'll notice that lights start at around 20 bucks and they go up to maybe like 700 bucks or something. Crazy expensive. If you're looking to get started in the hobby, I'd recommend you go with something on the low end of the spectrum. You know, if you get a crazy expensive light, those are going to be very strong, which is good for an experienced hobbyist looking to do like a really fancy tank with CO2 and liquid fertilizer and all that stuff. But if you're just jumping into the hobby, you don't want to do that because you're going to risk a chance of getting an algae storm, and it gets very complicated. So keep things simple. A small, easy LED like a Night Crew or Higer would be perfect. I'll leave some links in the description. LEDs are so affordable nowadays. I wouldn't even mess around with compact fluorescents. I definitely wouldn't mess around with any metal halides or things like that that are putting out a ton of heat. They're going to cost you a bunch of money, not only for the purchasing, but for the electrical bills. The second most important thing for growing plants is substrate. So same thing with light, some substrate is better than no substrate, but there are different types and some of them are better than the others. So there's two different types of substrate. Basically you have inert, and the definition of that is just chemically inactive. So that means there's no nutrients in there. They're just bare rocks or sand, something that plants can dig their roots into to give them a holding, but it's not going to provide them with any nutrients. So if we really want to give our plants something to grow nutrient wise, then a good choice is either dirt or aqua soil. And so people are very, very passionate about the kind of soil they use. Personally, I'm into aqua soil, but there's a lot of people out there who would advocate for using dirt, like dig some dirt up from outside and throw that in your fish tank, cap it with sand. That works just fine. But there's also a product out there called aqua soil. It's designed and built for aquariums, so you know that it's going to be like geared exactly for what you want to do. That's what it's designed for. So I would recommend that you get either one of those two options and lay that down in the bottom of your tank. Give it a nice, like 3 or 4 finger deep worth of substrate. That way your plants can really, really root in there. So with some nice substrate and lighting, you can pretty much guarantee that your plants are going to grow. Now that we've got the fundamentals down, lighting and substrate, plants should be growing just fine. Well, what happens down the road when the plants start to overcrowd the tank? Maintenance. Maintenance is one of the essential 3 things that I'd say that you need to be giving your plants. When you don't do maintenance on your plants, you run the risk of the fastest growing plants overtaking the slowest or the smallest plants in the aquarium. So you need a nice pair of plant shears or scissors just to get in there and cut away. Make sure that you're trimming the fastest growing plants back pretty good so that you allow light into the foreground and midground plants and everyone else. Otherwise, you're going to have wasted money and time putting those plants there because they're just going to die back. So some tips and tricks on maintaining your plants. Every time you cut a stem plant, you can take that head that you've cut and plant it back in the substrate. Also, when you cut that head, that stem that's been clipped, 2 new heads are going to grow out of that spot. So trimming isn't only important from a perspective of preventing overgrowth of the faster growing species, but it's important for allowing your tank to fill in and look really lush. It's very expensive to buy tons of plants for a big tank like this. So what you got to do is what I just explained. You clip the heads and you replant them. Gradually, after the course of a couple months, things start to really fill in. And that's kind of where I'm at with this tank. In 2 more months, it's going to look really, really lush. So it's not quite there yet, but give it a little patience and a lot of maintenance. Any planted tank will eventually fill in and look really, really cool. So another thing to think about when you're trimming plants like that is that wherever you cut and those 2 heads come out, it's going to send roots down from underneath. So you don't want to be cutting really, really high up at the top of your tank because then you're going to get all these visible roots everywhere. You want to be cutting maybe low enough that there's a mid-ground plant or hardscape in front of that background plant that you're trimming. That way the roots are covered and it's not kind of a gross mess that you're looking at. Maintaining mid-ground plants is pretty much the same thing. They're usually in some sort of stem form. If you're trimming foreground plants, you can just go through with the scissors and kind of mow it like a lawn. There's a few other types of plants that you don't want to just hack back at, something like Java fern and Anubias, or Amazon sword, Valsenaria, all those types of plants. They're not grasses, but they're not stems either. And for these types of plants, rosettes or epiphytes, we want to go in and clip at the base of each leaf. The reason that we don't want to just hack through and cut half the leaf off like we do with the stem is because then that whole leaf is gonna die, you know? Unlike the stem plant where we cut it and two heads grow out. So really make sure that you know what type of plant you have and where to trim them. There's a lot of plant guides out there. So just do a little bit of research. The wrong kind of trimming can result in kind of a goofy looking plant. And the worst case scenario is you cut these plants in the wrong spots and all of these stems and leaves die off and start to produce algae. Eventually, new stems and leaves will grow in, but for some of the slow growing plants, it's kind of a pain. I'm going to cut the video here today. Apologies. I know I said that I was going to cover some extra things you could be doing for your plants, but after filming, it ended up being like over 40 minutes. So I'm going to still try and cut some of that out, but I'm going to put the rest of the information on next week's video. So follow along next week if you want to learn some extra things that you could be doing for your plants that aren't necessary but would help you get the most out of your live plants. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what are some tips and tricks that you use for your live plants. Really appreciate your support. Watch some other videos, like, subscribe, all that stuff. That's a great way to ensure that I continue producing videos just by supporting my channel. I really appreciate it. Until next time, see ya.